Hello and welcome to TheJournal.ie's Facebook Live interview with Paul Howard, who's sitting here right next to me in Kielys of Donnybrook. Bit of a cheer maybe from the audience for Kielys.
Thank you.
Lovely. And for Paul. I'm Aoife Barry from TheJournal.ie and I'm delighted to be sitting here chatting to you again. I know we had an interview probably about a year ago now.
Yeah, it's this time last year. Yeah. I'm glad to be back as well.
Yes,
Thank you for having me back.
Excellent stuff. It's great for Kielys to be hosting us as well. We'll get onto that momentarily about the importance of Kielys here.
I might cry.
Yes, it's sad days. But we're here because of your new book, Dancing with the Tsars and not the Stars. It's quite important to pronounce that as the Russians would. It's going to be the #1 book this weekend. It's pretty amazing. But we're going to get to all the stuff about the book. But first of all, we start off with the fact that we're here in Kielys. You know, what's it like for yourself to be here at this stage for Kielys? And how do you think Ross would be feeling as well about...
Ross would just be devastated right now, as I am as well. I mean, Kielys has, it's such an important part of the books. It's such an important part of the Ross O'Carroll Kelly world. I would say it's more important than his home. Certainly he's treated it like a home over the years. But when I started writing the books 20 years ago, when I started writing those first columns, I felt like he needed a nag's head, He needed, like Del Boy has the nag's head. In Minder, they have, the Arthur Daly had the Winchester, and I kind of felt Ross needed his version of those things, and it was only ever going to be Kielys because, I knew it was it was well known as a rugby pub. It was right in the heart of Dublin 4. The clientele were his kind of people.
Yeah. His kind of guys, yeah.
And so it was always going to be Kielys. So it means a lot to me because before I knew Pat and Mary personally, I used to come here on a Thursday night. My column always had to be filed to the Sunday Tribune on a Friday morning, and on a Thursday night, if I had no idea what I was going to write about, I would just come in and sit at the bar. And I met Maeve Binchy when I was about 14, and she said to me, if you want to be a writer, you have to be a good listener. And her modus operandi was, when she researched, she would get on the number 8 bus in Dalkey, or get on the Dart and earwig conversations. And I did my earwigging over there at the bar. And there were so many Ross storylines were born out of real conversations that I overheard in this pub.
Wow. Some of those people might even be here today who inspired
Well, if they're looking for royalties, they're not getting any.
We have a few contracts you can sign after the interview later.
But it was, it's kind of... I think Kielys appears probably 15 times in each book. And I loved watching soap operas when I was younger. And I still do. Like, I still watch Coronation Street and I still watch EastEnders, and I just can't stop. It's a habit I can't break. And one of the things I always loved about those shows is that when something big has to happen, when there's that EastEnders moment, doom, 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 it always happens in the pub. Yeah. And, like the Rovers' Return is probably the roughest pub in England, given how many people are actually thrown out of there. And I have that thing when I write scenes, when I have something big, some big revelation that has to come out, like... For instance, Oisín, Ross's friend, came out as gay in the last book. Ross has become a father in this pub. Not in the pub, but he's discovered he's become a father in this pub. All of these big moments, I always situate them here. And just because it's a way... when I'm writing about Ross and his friends in the pub, I always picture them right there. Oh, wow. So when there's a big row between Fionn and Oisín and JP and Christian, it happens right there. And in my mind, when I'm writing, that's what I picture.
And there is another interesting connection with Ross here in this room, but it's just in a small room there, the men's bathrooms. Do you want to tell people about that connection? It's not as bad as you think.
So there was a running joke in the column for years that the trough in Kielys in the men's room is the most significant, is a really significant artifact in terms of Irish rugby history, because the greatest player to never play for Ireland urinated most of his talent into the trough over the years. So I said in a column one Saturday that, you would think, given, how much I've put into Kielys over the years, financially and in terms of bodily fluids, that they would put some kind of plaque on the wall over the urinal. And I got a phone call from Mary one Monday night, and she said, "We have a surprise waiting for you in Kielys. Would you come tonight?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And I came here, and Bernard Jackman was here, which was, a thrill to meet Bernard Jackman anyway. And Bernard said, "Come into the toilets with me." And so I went into the toilets, and there was about sort of 15 or 16 people in there gathered around the urinal. And above the urinal there was a like a little red curtain with like two little pulley ropes.
I've never been in the men's bathrooms, but I'd say that's kind of unusual.
Well, it's worth it, let me tell you. Well, somebody can watch the door for you, and you go in and have a look. But so we both pulled on these little pulley ropes, and it opened, and there was a plaque there, and it just said, "This plaque is dedicated to Ross O'Carroll Kelly, who hit and missed here for many years." And I was so emotional when I saw it, And it went down as a joke with a lot of people, but to me, that was like, I felt the way about that a lot of serious literary writers would feel if somebody put one of those blue plaques on the building they were born in. Wow. That's how I felt about that. Actually better. I think that's better than a Booker Prize for me.
You heard it here. That's amazing. And what it does show is how beloved, Ross is, to people. People love him, even though he's very difficult to love. But people, love him. They love reading about him. They love keeping up with him every week. What do you think it is about him that keeps people kind of coming back and really enjoying reading about him? Maybe they hate him. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think people's relationship with Ross has changed over the years, just as my relationship with him has changed. When I wrote those original columns in the Sunday Tribune and the first couple of books, I really didn't want people to like him. I mean, when I read those back now, it seems very harsh, and somebody was saying to me the other day, it's like when you watch the early episodes of The Simpsons, that you really didn't like Homer Simpson. He was a really hard character who used to throttle Bart and the other kids. And Ross was the same. I really didn't want people to like him. He was this obnoxious git who was kind of based on a few kids I'd seen around while I was covering schools rugby. One, I've talked about him before, the kid who said to his dad, "I don't give a fuck how you think I played. Just crack open the wallet." And and I always wonder what happened to him. I think he's probably running Irish Water or something now,
I'm sure he definitely isn't. To everybody watching on our Facebook Live at TheJournal.ie.
It was a joke. And then, the other kid who... I was waiting for the door one day, and the train pulled up, and every carriage was full except the last carriage. And there was hardly anyone in it, maybe 6 or 7 people wearing blazers and just young guys. And one of them stopped me getting on and said, "Sorry, dude, this is a rock carriage." And I said sorry to him. I apologised, sort of took a step backwards, sorry about that. And as the train pulled away, the doors closed and the train pulled away, and he gave me the guns through the window. So it was incidents like that. Rather than get angry, I decided to get even, and that's why I created Ross O'Carroll Kelly, and his initials are Rock, so it was pretty clear who I was getting at. But what I didn't expect was that the people whose skin I was trying to get under would embrace him as a kind of hero figure. Yeah. I just didn't think that was going to happen. But then schools started to ask me to come and talk to their transition students, like as if I was some kind of role model or something, And then I got asked to give the Blackrock College team their pep talk before they played Clongowes in a senior cup match. So I had no idea what to say to them. So I just gave them the speech that Father Fahey gave to the Castle Rock team in the first book. And it was just things like, you are the gilded ones, you are the golden generation, after today, you won't have to work for anything else in your lives ever again. And they laughed at every line. I couldn't understand it, but they laughed at every line. And they had this thing in Blackrock every year. They give the school over to the kids for a day on the day that they play their first match in the Senior Cup. So the teachers kind of stand down, almost like an army, and they stand down, and the prefects take over, and they have cheerleaders, and they have these big megaphones, and they chant, "You can't knock the rock! You can't knock the rock!" And all the kids stand in rows. It's a little bit like a Hitler Youth rally, you know, but a nice Hitler Youth rally, you know, and so. They always give these speeches, you know. They say things like, you know, this is the year of the lion, you know, and they torture this metaphor to death about the lion, about why the lion is the mightiest of all the beasts, and you, the students of Blackrock, are like that lion, you know. So it's great. So I did this whole thing about the year of the eagle. It's the year of the eagle. The eagle looks down on all the other creatures in God's kingdom, and he's imperious. He can pick off anybody he wants down there. And when I came down off the stage, they started, it's embarrassing to say this, but they started chanting, "Legend, legend, legend." And they formed this Guard of Honor. And it was about like 100 kids in this Guard of Honor. And I had to walk through this, like it was like a bar mitzvah or something, like, you know, a South Dublin bar mitzvah. I had to walk right the way through. And I got to the end, and I met a priest, and the priest was a little bit ashen-faced, and I said, "Was that okay?" And I thought it might have been the swearing, because I was effing and blinding like anything up there. And he said, "Oh no, it was fine, but it was remarkably similar to a speech I gave them 3 years ago."
My God, so you're too true to life, and that ties with what I was going to ask as well about, you know, where you draw the line between yourself and Ross, because you're very, very different, and the whole point was...
I hope so.
Yes, and the whole point was that, wasn't it? It was kind of examining class and examining how you felt about, you know, people of a certain class in Dublin. Yeah. But it must be weird then when people think you're actually the same, or when they get confused and like that.
Yeah, they often say to me, "Oh, what school did you go to, dude?" Like they expect me to say Michael's or Belvo or Clongowes, and I say St. Lawrence College in Loughlinstown, and they just look at me, "Sorry?" Like,
never heard of it.
So I just say, "Oh, it's an open prison where they let you sit the leaving cert." But a few years ago, St. Lawrence College in Loughlinstown, by the way, is a great school, and it's not an open prison. But a few years ago, it became a great repeat school. So I was able to tell kids from Blackrock, it's where you're going to go to get the points to get into college.
If you're just tuning in on Facebook Live, this is The Journal talking to Paul Howard, creator of Ross O'Carroll Kelly, whose new book, Dancing with the Tsars, is out now. And like your previous, with 18, this is your 18th book, isn't it, thereabouts?
This is book 18 in the trilogy, yeah.
Yeah. You know, this book is destined for the #1 spot on the bestseller list this weekend, which is unbelievable. I mean, every time you bring out a book, there's going to be that pressure to get to #1. How do you deal with knowing that you want to get to #1, but, you know, you're like, well, I've had it, you know, the last 18 years. Yeah. How do you deal with that?
It's about not taking it for granted. Like, I never take any book for granted. When I'm writing one, like I'm plotting book 19 at the moment, so I tend to work a year ahead of myself. So I'm meeting my editor, Rachel Pierce, next week, and at the moment I'm plotting the next book out beat by beat. So I know when I sit down to write it, every twist and turn that's going to happen in the book, or that I think is going to happen. I have a great editor in Rachel, in that she will go through my ideas, and we have this brilliant relationship where she never lets me overrule her. You know, like she's very good in you know, telling me what doesn't work, what she feels doesn't work, what she feels is a bit repetitious, and that's it really. And I listen to her a lot. And Penguin are, you know, a great publisher as well. You know, they never let me take anything for granted either. And every single book that comes out, it's like the first book all over again. We know we have to do the work. And you know, you never just presume. You know that because the series has gone on for so long, it's like you said, 18 books. every book has to be better than the one before. And if somebody reads this book and thinks, oh, that one's not as good as the last one, there's a chance they won't buy the next one. So everyone has to be better than the last one. And I think that's the secret of it, and just working hard on it. You know, I spent about 5 to 6 months between plotting and writing a book, and then there's a period of editing as well. So it is an all year round process.
And then when you're talking about plotting the book, so do you like collect things that are happening, you know, because the books really reflect what's going on in the world, in Ireland and the greater world. Not that Ross would have any clue that Brexit or anything like that's happening. You know, do you kind of think of things and pick them up and write them down and save them and then go back to them? Like, how do you plot that all together?
Yeah, I take notes all the time, and I try to buy little notebooks so I can keep the notes all together. But what I've discovered over the years is, back from my days when I used to come here and go on the 46A and go on the Dort and sit in the cafe in Brown Thomas and take notes and listen, especially listening to kind of women of a certain age, you know, those sort of lovely middle class women who shop in places like Marion Gale, you know, and I love listening to those women talk. And I wrote so many notes over the years for Fanula, especially, just from overhearing those conversations. But I would take these notes, and then I would sometimes they'd be on a bus ticket or a Brown Thomas receipt, or sometimes on a bit of a beer mat that I got from here. And if I was reading a book, I'd shove them into the book, and that would be my bookmark. But then if I didn't finish the book, I'd forget the notes were there. So I'm still finding notes from 1998, 1999 in old books.
Wow.
So now I try to keep them all together. But yeah, I mean, I watch the news all the time, and I read newspapers, and I read TheJournal.ie, obviously, every day. I'm on that every hour.
Good work, yeah.
And I try to keep it topical, you know.
Yeah.
So every book I try to reflect what's happening in the world at a particular time. So the early books were all about the boom, and then there was a sort of middle period that was all about the recession with Downturn Abbey and Nama Mia. And then the last few books have been about, well, a few books were about the recovery, and now it's all about this new chaotic world we're living in with Donald Trump, a Twitter troll in the White House, and, you know, Britain about to commit this act of Kiely, and mad people in Ireland thinking we should follow them, you know. So, and I try to put all of that stuff in as well. Yeah.
And I remember the last time we were talking, you were saying that the previous book, you had to change quite a bit because of a certain person who got into power in a certain country. Can you tell us about what happened with that? Yeah,
I had written the next book, which was the book that was Operation Transformation. I had written a book, and I don't know. I think I probably listened to the mainstream media too much. I was just convinced that Hillary Clinton, like a lot of people, was going to win the election. I mean, I wasn't a Hillary fan or anything, but I just couldn't conceive that Donald Trump. I remember Donald Trump. I covered boxing for the Sunday Tribune for years. I remember Donald Trump when he'd walk into the pub and everybody would laugh. You know, when I covered fights in Atlantic City, he would walk in and everyone go, "There's Donald Trump." I never would have believed he would be the most powerful man in the world one day. And so I had a book written, and it was done, and I'd sent it to my editor, and then the election happened, and Donald Trump got into the White House, and I just had this really, really uneasy sense that it was going to be 2 years now before I could write a book that would reflect this extraordinary way that the world had seemed to slip on its axis. And so I went away. I was in Australia just after Christmas, and I wasn't sleeping properly at night. And I don't. If I've done something, if I've written something I'm not really happy with, and I'm writing it again in my sleep. And I rang Rachel as soon as I got back, and I just said I want to start again. And like that's sort of 6 weeks after my final deadline.
Wow.
So it was great because Rachel agreed. And if I tell Rachel I want to do this thing that's going to involve loads of extra work for me, she knows I'm not doing it just for kicks, you know.
Yeah.
And she felt the same way, that the book I'd written wasn't really reflective of this world we were suddenly living with. So I spent about 6 weeks just tore it apart. And when you tear a book apart, it happens quite a lot. it's like taking a clock apart and you're just looking at all these cogs and wheels and you've no idea how it all goes back together again. So I did, 14, 16-hour days, 7 days a week for 6 weeks and pulled together Operation Transformation. But it nearly killed me. I mean, I died writing that book.
God, Trump is just responsible for so much sadness in people's lives. Was that the most dramatic thing that's happened with a Ross book for you?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I've never had to do anything as dramatic as start all over again. But yeah, I mean, like there's been, there's sometimes you're approaching a deadline and something happens and you're suddenly wrong-footed, or like a title will change very, very late in the day.
Yeah.
Like those things happen quite a bit, because the titles are so important to each book. I have this thing, and Penguin have it as well, that you have to make people laugh when they see the new title.
Yeah.
And if it isn't the kind of title that makes people go, they don't have to belly laugh and fall over in the street, but they have to go, that's funny. Then there's a chance they'll buy the book.
Yeah.
And it's no coincidence that the least funny titles are always the slowest sellers with the Ross books. Yeah.
What are your favourite titles that you've come up with?
The Oh My God Delusion. I like the Oh My God Delusion, and I like Nama Mia. And the thing about those two is I knew I was going to write a book called The Oh My God Delusion and a book called Nama Mia before I even had a plot.
Yeah.
Some of them, like the Shelburne Ultimatum, I had no idea what I was going to call that book until very, very late in the day. And it was one of those books where, it's 6 weeks before we go to the printers, and I'm still not happy with the working title I have. But I knew there was an ultimatum in it, and I just had to make the storyline happen in the Shelburne Hotel to justify calling it the Shelburne Ultimatum. So sometimes they're actually quite contrived. Yeah. But then sometimes, like with Dancing with the Tsars, it just fits the storyline perfectly,
Yeah, absolutely. As you'll see, it does combine two interesting things. And you might be tuning in on Facebook watching us, our live interview here in Kielys of Donnybrook with Paul Howard. And your new book, that we just mentioned there, Dancing with the Tsars. Without spoiling too much of it, do you want to tell the audience, if they haven't read it yet? I'm sure some have picked up a copy tonight. What are you exploring in the new book?
Yeah, it's just the usual chaos of Ross O'Carroll Kelly's world and the chaos of the world around him. So now he's gone through lots of different incarnations, Ross. But right now he's a stay-in-bed father, and he's struggling with the job of raising a family. And but there's all these awful things happening. Like his wife, who he's estranged from, is pregnant with a baby that may or may not be his, and he doesn't find out until quite a bit into the book whether it is or not his. His father has started this party called New Republic, a political party. He's trying to take Ireland out of the European Union, and he's also selling off Ireland's forests and other natural resources to dodgy Russian interests. But Ross's only concern is winning the ultimate prize that South Dublin has to offer, and that's the Goatstown Glitter Ball that's on offer for the Mount Anvil, the Strictly Mount Anvil father and daughter dance competition.
And what that means is we see so much of his relationship with Honor, his delightfully, really kind daughter. I mean, actually, she's just really evil. Can you tell me about that? Because that was, I think, one of my favorite parts of the book was just seeing more of their relationship and just seeing how they get on and how someone can be evil and yet truly loved at the same time. Yeah,
I only discovered recently when I was writing a piece for the Irish Times about my dog that Honor is essentially my dog.
Is your dog that evil?
No, he's not evil, but he's obstinate and he has his own mind and he's stubborn. And he's all of the things that Honor is. He's very sweet in a lot of ways, but I have exactly the same relationship with him that Ross has with Honor, in that he does, like, I could call him 100 times and he just looks at me and just stares at me across the room. And then when I ignore him, he trots over and he's all affection. And that's kind of Ross and Honor, and he's very devious and cunning, and self-centered, as animals should be. You know,
Yeah.
he's just worrying about the next meal and everything. And Honor, Ross's relationship with Honor is exactly the same. You know, there's a when I came up with the idea of Honor, Sorcha dreamed of having this beautiful princess of a daughter, and I'm sure Ross had his own hopes for Honor as well. And all parents do, you know, they hope that their children come to reflect back at them their better qualities. But sometimes children reflect parents' worst qualities back at them. And that's what I wanted to explore with Honor. They hoped and hoped for this daughter, and she's born, and she has Sorcha's princess complex, and she has Ross's obnoxiousness. So Ross, and also she's so much more intelligent than Ross. Like intellectually, she passed Ross out when she was 4 years old. So a lot of the time, he's just in awe of her cunning, her deviousness. She goes to quite a few lengths to win the Goatstown glitter ball. You know, just unimaginably devious things she does to nobble all the other contestants. And yeah, so but it's the relationship that's growing between them, and I think it's kind of interesting to me that Ross is starting to see all of these qualities in her that he kind of admires. You know, those sort of qualities that most parents, not in South Dublin because they like those kind of things in this part of the world, but normal parents would say, I don't like that kind of thing. And my daughter, he's kind of saying, you know, she could be the head of a bank one day, you know?
Do you ever worry when you're writing one of the books or a scene in the book that you might have gone too far? Are there ever moments where you have to pare things a bit back because maybe you pushed it a bit?
Yeah, I mean, all the time I'm saying, is that too much? And then I hear something, and then I think maybe I'm not pushing it far enough, you know. So yeah, you're sort of trying to. I'm trying to satirize. Mostly kind of lifestyle aspirations. That's what a lot of I do is about. It's about satirizing this sort of lifestyle dream that Ross and people like Ross have, and it doesn't really exist. You know, it's a completely fake world. But yeah, I hear things all the time. I overhear parents talking, and I think, firstly, I can't believe I just heard that, and secondly, I'm putting that in the next book.
And, there's definitely different people in Irish society who people feel, saw that the crash was coming, saw the Celtic Tiger was coming to an end. And do you think that Ross is one of those people who doesn't maybe get he could be the David McWilliams, maybe that people might not realise he actually does give us some clues as to where Irish society is heading? Yeah,
I mean, I think Ross didn't expect the recession to affect him like he thought it would affect other people. And when I wrote those recession books, I actually thought it was the most interesting time up until that point in Ross's life, because, he had all of these certainties that underpinned his life, that he would always have money. Sorcha had her shop in the Powerscourt Townhouse Centre, and which was a tax dodge for her dad. And, but these things would always be there. There would always be a Reynards,
Yeah.
And then suddenly this world that he's used to is swept away. The whole geography of his world is torn apart. And I really enjoyed writing those recession books. I think there's a recession trilogy in the middle. And to write about Ross just sort of cut adrift in the world, it was kind of interesting to see his friends as well struggle. Like Ushin was declared bankrupt, and JP, who ran hook, line and sinker, the estate agents just down here on Ballsbridge, had to shutter the place, had to close it down. And so I really, those things were really interesting to write about. As the writer of Ross O'Carroll Kelly, I suppose I always had some sense that there was a day of reckoning coming for people like Ross O'Carroll Kelly. I always thought that the economy would cool down, but I did believe the soft landing thing. I believed that nonsense. I didn't think it would tank like it did. I didn't think it would happen so quickly. I was listening to Ivan Yates interview Bertie Ahern today. It's the 10th anniversary of the collapse of Lehman Brothers today, and it seems, in a funny way, those 10 years have gone so fast. It seems like 5 years ago or something. And I was thinking about that time and remembering that between Lehman Brothers closing and within sort of 2 weeks of that, there were shops shuttered in Dublin. There were businesses closed down in Dublin. And that's how kind of interconnected finance is and was and still is, that it just took one big shock to bring everything down, And, it didn't matter that we were sort of geographically isolated from America. The effects were just felt instantly.
And do you think then that reading comedy and exploring all that through comedy is like a way that we can, I suppose, digest what happened? That Irish people can look back at your trilogy around the recession and through that comedy accept what happened or deal with it in some way? Like that it's serious, but it's also a way of letting out maybe a bit of relief, or not even release, I suppose is the word.
I mean, I don't know if it's therapeutic in any way. I suspect it's not. I mean, I suppose I had to be really careful with those books as well, because, I never wanted to feel like I was sending up situations that people found themselves in. It was very serious. People lost their jobs, people lost their homes, people lost their pensions that they'd put money in for decades, and suddenly they have nothing through no fault of their own, through the greed and stupidity of the ruling and banking classes in this country, and it took it all down. I'm not sure if comedy can act as a palliative to that situation, but I know from my point of view, as a journalist, I wouldn't know how to describe that. But I know as a comedy writer, as a satirist, I know how to write about that world, and I know how to write about it in a way that makes people feel in some small way vindicated, to feel that, this is, and this is what good satire is about. It's about holding people to account while amusing them. Yeah. And that's what I did with those books.
And you satirize, should I say, Irish politics a lot. It's really interesting to see kind of how you do that, because you take the fringe party that becomes actually very, very popular. And there is a big discussion at the moment around posh politicians and whether posh politicians deserve to, have the mick taken out of them. What do you think Ross would think about this sudden, need to discuss posh politicians and what they're doing wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, Owen, I mean, we're talking about Owen Murphy, really, aren't we?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I couldn't say. But
is he in tonight?
Well, his constituency office isn't too far away, so
it's a funny thing, because they seem to have come from nowhere. Like when I see like David Cameron and Boris Johnson. British politics has always had these posh boys. It's always had Oxford and Cambridge boys who do well, Yeah. But Irish politics has never had this. Like when I look at like Owen Murphy, I look at Leo Varadkar, I look at Simon Coveney, I look at Simon Harris. To me, like I have, like, first of all, I've got things on my Skybox at home that are older than them that I haven't watched yet. But the thing that strikes me when I look at them is they look like head boys, and they are kind of that. They're like, Leo Varadkar just strikes me as the head boy of King's Hoss, and but it's a kind of new development in Irish politics. We've never really had just head boys at the cabinet table, posh boys at the cabinet table, and that's why people are noticing it. I feel the same way as everybody, or as most people, about this, that if they're good, if they're effectual, and if they can bring about social change, I don't care how posh they are. Like there are politicians from people before profit who are actually just as posh, and they're campaigning for something different. They're different kinds of politicians with different ideologies. But I kind of think the poshness thing doesn't matter. All I really care about is, are they any good? Mm-hmm.
And in this book, there's a lot of discussion about feminism, and it just cracked me up a lot. A lot of the bits about it were just really, very wry, very, very well done. But it looked to me that you're probably spending a lot of time on Twitter reading a lot of, the conversations and the arguments that go on, because some of the language in it was quite funny. But you managed to do it in a way that wasn't like insulting people, but also showing, like, I felt like, oh God, I can see myself in some of those descriptions. Certainly. Can you tell me about, like, just Twitter? I suppose. Do those
listen,
things
I'm just relieved that you said I did it in a way without insulting people, because
I'll talk to you later about how insulted I really was. But
the thing about social media, and especially Twitter, is to be on it now, when you get up in the morning and you decide to say something on Twitter, it's like a high wire act without a net. It is, you do have that moment before, and you should have that moment where you pause before you tweet something and you think, could this change my life? And a tweet does have the potential to change your life. You could tweet something and suddenly your professional life, your personal life are over, and you're suddenly sitting at home in your dressing gown wondering what happened to this world you used to live in. But it is, I love it as a tool. I'm addicted to the dopamine hit of people liking what you tweet, and I think most users would say the same thing. It is very, very addictive. But I would say, on balance, it hasn't been a good thing for the world. I don't think it's been a good thing for the world. I think, if we can end up with somebody like Donald Trump as the most powerful man in the world, and his main tool by which he talks to people is Twitter, and when he went into the White House, you kind of had this sense that there were cleverer people than him around him, and if he wanted to press the button, somebody would say, Donald, don't touch that. But now you kind of think he could tweet something at 4 o'clock in the morning that could cause somebody to
North
attack
Korea
America.
to do something that they shouldn't really be doing.
Yeah. So, and I don't think that amount of power in the hands of somebody so stupid is a good thing for the world,
And yet Ross O'Carroll Kelly has his own Twitter account. So do you run that, or?
Yeah, I police that very closely. I do. I run that, and so Ross has quite a few followers on it, and I try to keep it just to rugby, because and I try not to engage in contentious things, things that might have me up at 3 o'clock. I've got friends who are sitting up at 3 o'clock in the morning arguing with strangers on Twitter, trying to change their minds about things. And it's not, I don't think that's good for anyone's mental health, actually.
No, it's probably not. Getting too involved and all that sort of stuff is definitely good to step away. So I suppose looking to the future, you've got the 18th book out. Ross has been on stage. He's done many different things. He's had quite an eventful life so far. When you look at what you want to do next with Ross, what are you thinking?
Right now I'm thinking about book 19 because it's due before Christmas. But yeah, in the future, I would love to see Ross on the screen, and I've been working on a television series. I've worked on several television series over the years, and it's kind of almost happened a couple of times. And I've written a 6-part TV drama, comedy drama, which is it's set in 2004. So it kind of feels like Jeeves and Wooster now when I read it back. It's good. There's a real element of nostalgia about it. It feels like a period piece. So it's set in that world of the Celtic Tiger, where, you can sort of, every semi-detached house on the road has a hot tub in the back garden. And people are drinking cocktails that cost €700 because they've got gold leaves on the top. Just a lot of, I put a lot of that madness from the Celtic Tiger era into it, because I kind of think now that, now that we're through those really, really desperately bad years of 2009, 10, 11, 12, the worst of the recession, I think people can look back now on those years and kind of think, yeah, we were a bit ridiculous, There was, I know not everybody engaged in it, but there was a lot of madness happened, So that's the subject of the television thing. So I'm hoping something might happen maybe late next year.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll all be thinking about our SSIAs and hoping that they come back. And writing then for screen versus writing a book, writing a play, they're very different. How are you finding writing for screen?
Yeah, when you're writing dialogue and stage instructions, it's much slower. You would think it wouldn't be, but when I write, I can write maybe when I'm writing Ross, I write maybe 1,500 words a day. When I'm writing dialogue, you're actually imagining it being heard in a theatre, or you're imagining it being watched on television. So it's a lot slower because I tend to agonize over every single word. Like, I'll write a sentence in the morning and delete it in the afternoon.
Wow.
And, you know, sometimes if I write 5 lines of dialogue, I'll tell myself that's a good day. Whereas if I was writing a Ross book, it would be a disastrous day and I would never ever finish the next one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult kind of experience, isn't it, to kind of be a creative person and try to deal with all of that and all the expectation on you. And before we finish up, I really wanted to get a few more kind of Ross anecdotes from you, like the most stupid things you think that Ross has ever done. I know he's done a lot of stupid things, but your favourite moments and, you know, the most silly things maybe he's done in the past.
The most silly things. He, when Leinster won their first Heineken Cup, he dressed up as the Leo the Lion, the mascot, and ran on the field. And then made a bit of a show of himself on the field. But then when they beat Ulster a few years later, he put the extra star on his shirt before they'd actually won the match. And the Ulster fans made him, it was a freezing cold day, that match, the Ulster fans made him take his shirt off and sit like bare-chested in the crowd until Leinster had actually won the match. And he turned Leinster blue. He was the colour of hypothermia.
Amazing. Well, there's plenty more, you know, silly things that he's done in this book, so it's a joy to read about what scrapes he's going to get himself into. Thanks so much, Paul Howard,
Thanks very much
for coming along.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Thanks a million to everybody here. Such a great audience tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks a million to Kielys and to Penguin and TheJournal.ie for this Paul Howard interview here in Kielys. And the book, Dancing with the Tsars, is out now.